Darktide's latest update has once again changed the veteran's talent tree to fix some of the glaring issues that it had, most notably the large amount of talent points needed to reach the veteran's keystone. With this new update, the talent tree is a lot more flexible due to removing some of the passive nodes and moving around various talent nodes as well, which makes for a much more flexible talent tree overall. After trying out for the past day and experimenting with various builds, I'm glad to say that the veteran tree actually feels a lot better now. Previously, you needed to choose between some of the stronger or more versatile talent nodes or your keystones, but now veteran players have a much greater ability to pick different talent nodes to complement their builds while still acquiring their keystones as well. Overall, the change is fantastic and it's really helping me enjoy experimenting with different builds again. While it's far easier now to make builds, there's still some issues with the veteran tree. Grenades are one big example. The croc grenades are absolutely amazing and can be used for clearing out crushers and maulers and any other armored enemies and maybe some bosses too. Frag grenades are also a great AoE that inflicts bleed, and while I may personally prefer croc grenades, frag grenades are very useful as well. Smoke grenades, however, are kind of pathetic. Smoke grenades honestly just don't feel impactful enough to take over any of the other two grenades, so it needs something to help differentiate it and make it more viable. There's also still some talent nodes that honestly don't feel that great on their own. 25% ammo bonus on the veteran tree is nice for range builds, but most range builds will usually revolve around las guns or plasma guns. The problem with this is that right after the ammo increase, there is a talent node that makes it so that the critical hits with las guns don't consume any ammo, so if you're going for a las gun build, the 25% extra ammo can be a pretty lackluster option, but it's also a necessary node to acquire if you want the las gun crit node. I'd honestly like it if they made the 25% ammo a passive for the veteran again. I know previously it used to be 50%, which I can understand that might have been way too much, but giving them 25% or maybe even 20% extra ammo on veteran as a passive and removing the current node, honestly I think would go a long way to helping veteran really differentiate itself. Another problem for veterans are their auras. Among the 3 auras for veteran, the scavenger aura is honestly just by default the best aura. This wouldn't be too bad if the other auras were at least comparable, but honestly they're not. The veteran's other 2 auras give either a 5% damage boost or a 5% movement speed boost, which doesn't feel that noticeable. I don't think Survivalist needs a nerf, but I do think that the other 2 auras definitely do need a buff to at least make them worthwhile. The veteran's combat abilities are also a bit of a mixed bag. Execution stance is good, but you need to have the right weapon for it. And honestly, I think it needs some quality of life changes like having it automatically reload your weapon again, which will allow for more weapons to be usable with executioner stance. Infiltrate is actually pretty decent. I wasn't a fan of it before, but now I actually been enjoying it a lot. There still are too many different nodes to modify its abilities though, and I personally feel like one of the nodes could be made into base kit to infiltrate or just reworked entirely, as it doesn't feel worth devoting all your points into the infiltrate modifiers. Lastly, the keystones for veteran need some adjustments too. I'm actually quite fond of the focus target keystone, and I think it's the veteran's best keystone. I don't think it really needs any significant changes, but I have noticed an issue with it where if someone else pings a target and I try to ping them, the game will usually require me to ping them multiple times because the action to acknowledge someone else's ping takes priority. Weapon specialist is also pretty decent, and with its nodes it definitely excels with certain builds. I've been enjoying Combat Knife Revolver on Veteran with Weapon Specialist and just weaving in and out of melee with the occasional headshot to specials. I think Weapon Specialist just needs some slight tweaks to its numbers, a little bit of buffs, maybe giving more stamina when activating melee specialists, but overall it's a pretty decent keystone. The real problem is Marksman's Focus. It's probably the most unintuitive of the keystones. It requires you to get headshots to gain stacks, which is perfectly fine, but the problem is that you start to lose stacks when you move unless you're consistently hitting headshots. This means that if you end up needing to switch to melee or reposition, your stacks will start to disappear. This isn't too problematic in most difficulties, but once you start hitting Damnation and Auric missions, maintaining your stacks becomes a lot harder to do. And honestly, it feels like you were risking yourself way too much for your stacks. I think adding in some kind of toughness damage reduction to Marksman's Focus, or maybe extending the 3-second grace period before stacks start going down to 5 seconds would go a long way to making it feel better in higher difficulties. I have some more ideas on how to improve the veteran tree, but I want to take a look at this one suggested balance tree from a user on Reddit that I think has a lot of good and interesting ideas for the veteran tree. So looking at this tree, charismatic, they actually made it so that it will replenish 5% toughness to allies and coherency every 5 seconds. I actually think that would be pretty nice. Charismatic right now is just kind of okay, but it's not really something that I'll ever take. I don't really devote the points ever to it. So I think a slight buff to charismatic would be great. Smoke grenade, I like this idea, adding in the benefit of highlighting enemies that are inside of the smoke. It'll be really nice because if you're obscuring the vision of the enemies so that they can't shoot you, it sucks that that's all that it does, and they'll reposition pretty quickly, and sometimes honestly I feel like they'll still shoot through it, but being able to obscure the vision and both highlight them for our own team so that we can pick them off better I think would be a nice little buff to smoke grenade, because honestly it needs something. I changed the grenade tinker as well, which would also, it would be another buff to the smoke grenades by adding in a gas effect so that it will go ahead and choke out scab and drag enemies. Would actually be really nice as well. It would honestly be a nice little change of like obscuring enemy vision and kind of like doing damage to them and maybe forcing them to reposition. It sounds like a lot, but honestly compared to the frag grenade and the croc grenade, smoke grenades needs quite a bit to really feel comparable to them. Covering fire, that actually gives toughness back and I believe a damage boost to allies when you kill an enemy with a ranged attack near them. This basically increases the radius of that from 5 meters to 7 meters, and increasing the duration of the damage boost and stuff from 3 seconds to 5 seconds. I think that would be pretty neat. It would help out a lot because if you're playing a ranged vet or a support vet, you'll be able to really help out your frontline fighters, and if your frontline fighters are getting help from you through your nodes, that means they can take more aggro, which means you're less likely to be swarmed by the enemy. Born Leader is actually a pretty interesting thing in that it makes it so that your allies will regenerate any a percentage of the toughness that you generate. So this by default is 15%. This will change from 15 to 25% and actually move it all the way up here underneath this. Or I'm not sure about moving it here, but the 25% and 15% would actually be pretty interesting. I think that might be a little too much. Maybe like 20% would be better, but still, I think Born Leader is a talent node that is pretty good in theory. It's not bad in certain builds, but it's not really something that I would really want to go for. Buffing Fire Team Aura is 100%. Fire Team Aura benefit would actually make it so that the range firearms will actually deal a further 5% increase in damage. I think that'd be pretty interesting. Honestly, just anything to really make it feel like you're not wasting a talent point by getting Fire Team Aura instead of Survivalist. And in Close and Kill Aura, this by default increases your movement speed by yourself and your allies by 5%. And a little benefit to it is reduce sprint cost by 10% while enemies are within 10 meters. That actually would be pretty nice. You still close the distance, but you won't use as much stamina, and stamina is super important for melee. So that would really help out in a melee-based team. So an interesting thing that I saw, that they moved Duck and Dive up here, which you gain 30% stamina whenever you dodge any kind of range attack by sprinting, sliding, whatever. And it took away Grenadier, which gives you 1 more grenade, and combined it with Twin Blast. So making a new talent that gives +1 grenade and Twin Blast, which is a 20% chance to toss a second grenade when you throw any grenade. I think that's actually a pretty interesting idea. I think by themselves, the +1 grenade and Twin Blast aren't really that great. They're like a little nice thing to have, but they're not really something that you would really go for. Combining them might make them a little too strong. So maybe if it was something like +1 grenade and like a 15% chance, I think that'd be pretty neat, and I would like that because it would cut down a little bit more on the tree, and it would make it a talent that's much more appealing to get on its own. I didn't actually talk about voice of command earlier because honestly I think it's pretty fine as it is right now. It's a very strong thing. I love it very much, but they did do a little buff to it. So only in depth is due to the end. This is the one that it increases the cooldown and lowers the radius of voice of command, but in exchange you can pick up teammates with it. Adding a benefit where the radius and cooldown are only negatively affected if you actually revive a down ally would be pretty interesting, but honestly I'm not sure about it. It might be a little too broken because the whole trade-off of it in the first place is the fact that you're purposely making your cooldown longer and making it smaller. Maybe instead, reduce the radius debuff by a little bit. But even then, yeah, this change to only in depth is due to the end would be pretty interesting, but I'm not 100% with it. Executioner stance, increasing the base duration from 5 seconds to 10 seconds would be pretty interesting. As it is right now with Executioner stance, if you're going to use it, if you really want to take full advantage of it, you kind of need the current version of Relentless, where it will add 5 seconds to the time in Executioner stance every time you get a kill with it. But if you buff the base duration from execution stance from 5 seconds to 10 seconds, and then maybe rework Relentless, or maybe you even be able to take it away or do something with it, I'm not sure. I think that'd be pretty interesting. Make it so that execution stance would be a bit better, but honestly I'm pretty fine with it how it is currently. I just wish that it would reload your gun. There's some changes to infiltrate here as well. Added a benefit, minus 90% threat for 5 seconds leaving stealth. That's currently one of the modifiers, and making that a baked in thing to infiltrate, I think would actually be pretty interesting. As it is right now, melee veteran is kind of like a backline assassin of sorts, because they don't have the tankiness of a zealot, but they do have some speed and they do have some raw damage. So that will really kind of lean into the whole assassin or rogue kind of aspect of a melee veteran, and that they're going to do a lot of damage and they're going to be sneaky and all these things. But if you hit them once, they're probably going to crumble. Another change with it is that they actually make it so that low profile, a rework version of it, will make it so that threat reduction lasts for an extra 5 seconds. So that means that if you want the extra threat reduction, that'd be nice. Honestly, I think just adding in the 90% threat into the base kit and removing this node entirely would be great, because as it is right now, Infiltrate has the most nodes out of all of them. So I think removing one of them will make it a lot better. So this one, new rework gathering intelligence, gather intel on enemies by tagging them while infiltrating. Once tagged, they will remain outlined, and when infiltrate ends, all outlined enemies will be exploited, applying 15% brittleness for 7 seconds to all targets at once. So brittleness is basically like armor penetration. I think it reduces their armor, if I remember correctly, or it either reduces their armor or increases their damage taken. I think it'll be interesting. The only thing that I actually worry about is the fact that like people really love the spam ping, and that can be quite annoying. But I think that would be pretty interesting for making it so that it would give a teamwork aspect to infiltrate, while also still maintaining its whole kind of like skullduggery, you know, hiding around assassin kind of feel to it. Demolition team added a buff where they will also replace one grenade to allies' coherency with a 2.5% chance. So above the demolition team would actually be also pretty interesting. So with this adds a benefit of also replenishing one grenade to allies and coherency with a 2.5% chance. So basically it's kind of reverting the old nerf to it. Currently it's a 5% chance for just yourself, and a while back it actually was a 5% chance for everyone in your team, which understandably could be very strong, and it honestly made Demolition Team a must pick. If you were to change it to a 2.5% chance, honestly, I think 2.5 might still be a little too much, but like a 1.5 or a 1% chance for teammates, I think that would be a lot better. It would still probably put Demolition Team as kind of a must pick. Honestly, it's already kind of a must pick in my opinion. I can see why it might be kind of game breaking maybe, but I would not be opposed if they did a slight buff to it so that my allies can also get a grenade back as well. Competitive Urge, a little buff to that, where buffing or replenishing toughness to an ally increases the proc chance of that ally from 2.5% to 5% chance for 3 seconds, would be pretty interesting. So basically, when you proc Competitive Urge is that whenever an ally kills any enemy, you have a very slight chance of giving yourself kind of a damage bonus. And I think a couple of other buffs to yourself as well. I think that would actually make it so that support veterans would be even stronger if you added in that benefit, which I am not opposed to at all. Support vet is my favorite. I don't think it's really necessary, but I would not be opposed to that at all. Keep their heads down. That's 50% extra suppression on your attacks, and an added benefit of replenish 2% toughness to you and allies and coherency when you suppress scab or drag enemies. I actually very much like this idea, because suppression is interesting. When you as a player get suppressed, you're screwed. You can't do anything. When an enemy gets suppressed, I can no longer see them. I can no longer headshot them. So if I'm not running like a plasma gun or anything that has kind of like penetration, or if I don't reposition, it's a lot harder to kill off that enemy, and then they'll eventually just poke their head back out again later on and start shooting again once suppression is over. As it is right now, I don't really like suppression on the player side, because it doesn't feel that great. It doesn't feel like it really gives you a huge benefit in my opinion. So, but buffing the 50% suppression node so that you'll actually replenish toughness when you suppress enemies, that would actually, I think, be a really nice change without removing the core feature of the suppression node. So looking at the keystone changes that were suggested, chink in the armor, which is rending, currently it's 10% when you have, I believe, 10 stacks. This changed it all the way up to 15%, which would be pretty nice. It would definitely benefit a lot for range builds. A lot of veteran range builds will especially revolve around the las guns, and las guns aren't really that great against armored units. So increasing the rending bonus by a little bit would actually help out a lot in bringing for las gun builds. Long range just has adding a benefit that doubles the amount of stacks earned if the kill was more than 20 meters away. I like that idea a lot, actually. It's rewarding for players who are able to snipe from a long range. It's basically rewarding skill, in my opinion. It's a nice rewarding thing to reward players for hitting shots that are a bit harder than other shots, if that makes sense. Camouflage added benefit, gain minus 2% threat per stack while generating stacks this way. So camouflage is the one where when you're standing still, you gain stacks, basically. This will also make so that you generate less threat, which means that enemies are more likely to target your allies than they are to attack you. Your threat level returns to normal when you stop generating stacks. So it's a benefit to standing still shooting vets, which I understand the point of it, but also I worry about it because I think it would encourage some bad habits from players. So I'm not really too sure about it, but I do think that marksman focus does need some kind of benefit overall that will reduce the overall threat of the veteran or give them some kind of toughness damage reduction. Which is funny because the next one, tunnel vision, added benefit, gained 1% toughness damage reduction per stack. Again, I think, yeah, toughness damage reduction would be great on veteran. That's for marksman focus specifically, I mean. And then weapon specialist. Always pair it to keep it loaded. Added benefit, the ammo replenished this way deals 10% increased damage. So basically, as it is right now, when you activate range specialist, which is the way this works is that when you attack with your melee weapon, you'll be able to gain enough stacks of to eventually get your range specialist stack, and then when you switch to your range weapon, you activate range specialist. With this node right here, you regain 3.33% of your ammo into your gun, which is pretty nice, and it does really well with revolvers because if you proc it even once, you'll at least reload one bullet no matter what. This change will make it so that that one bullet you get would do 10% increased damage, which I think would be pretty interesting and encourages even more about switching weapons mid-combat. Reinvigorate grants 25% stamina cost reduction and 10% melee power for 3 seconds. I think this would be a nice little change. You use less stamina, and your melee will also be increased as well. On your toes, this one right here, whenever you switch from melee to range specialist or vice versa, you actually will restore 20% of your toughness, and this will add another 15% stamina increase on either activation. I think that actually would be a very nice change as well. If you're constantly switching between stuff and you're trying to proc these different things, sometimes your stamina is going to be running low, especially if you're running something like Deadeye, which consumes stamina when you're aiming. I think that's a nice little change to it as well. Overall, I really like what this person did with this little veteran rework. I originally meant to do this video a lot sooner before they actually did the changes so I could talk more about the movement of stuff, but I still think that there's a lot of interesting stuff on this tree that could really be used to benefit the veteran without making them too strong in comparison to other classes. I'm actually going to go ahead and link the original post of this in the comments below. Actually, no, not in the comments, in the description below. So if you guys wanted to check it out and see it there, you can go ahead and check it out there. Anyways, y'all, thank you all so much for watching. Let me know what you think about the current veteran skill tree. Whether you think it's good, it's bad, what do you think could be improved upon, and what do you think is a downgrade compared to before. But yeah, that shall be it for this video, and I will see you all next time. Take care.